Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Isaac from Guns for Everyone. This is going to be a long video, and hopefully, people who are interested in the truth or trying to find the truth at least will have the patience to watch this video. I've been wanting to make this video for a while, but it's been difficult because I don't know how to organize my thoughts around it. But I want to thank Gun Owners Radio. Yesterday put out an excellent video on this topic, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But it helped me, as I was listening to it, start to formulate maybe a little bit more clear outline of how I think this information should be presented. And the information we're going to be talking about is USCCA, um, concealed carry insurance, attorneys on retainer, Kayla Giles, and what I think, what I know, and what I think are really going on with this issue around self-defense coverage. Let's just call it that for now. I do concealed carry classes quite a bit, and these questions do come up in the classes sometimes. People who are paying attention, who are watching YouTube, are hearing, oh, USCCA had a problem or a couple of problems, and it's really hard to explain in the classroom what's really going on because we just don't have time. And I'm going to attempt to cover it in this video, and I'm not going to do a great job of it because this is completely unrehearsed. I did take notes, and I'm going to read off my notes here to try to keep me on track. So, first off, full disclosure, I have recommended USCCA, and USCCA has sponsored our classes in the past. They don't anymore. They haven't for a couple of years. About 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, I can't remember, they actually came back to Guns for Everyone and say, hey, we want you back, and here, can we make it happen? And here's what we're willing to offer. And we said no. And it wasn't because we don't like money or we don't like USCCA. It was just a problem with how USCCA was integrating into our classes, and it's just a style thing. It was no bad blood or anything like that. But all that to say is that we told them no after we dissolved that relationship the first time. So I have some issues with USCCA, but it's not around their legal coverage, and it's not something that's really that important for this conversation and relevant at all. So I'm not going to talk about those things. I do currently recommend another product, Firearms Legal Protection, a competitor to USCCA, and they do pay to be in the concealed carry classes, and that's just the business, and I'll talk more about that later, how they market and why they market that way. But so I do have a current relationship with Firearms Legal Protection. It's not a lot of money, but I gotta say it. If I'm gonna talk about this stuff, I have to say that stuff. I don't get paid for these videos. Nobody gives me money to talk about any of these companies in these videos. I'm not an influencer. I'm not making money on this video. I don't even make YouTube ad money. So, uh, now, let's talk about what self-defense insurance is and what it is not. Self-defense insurance, and I'm going to use that term, and I'll probably use these terms interchangeably as I talk about this, but self-defense insurance, the idea behind it is to have a plan for how you would find an attorney and pay for an attorney after you defended yourself. And this started out with just using a firearm for self-defense. This started with the NRA's product Carry Guard, and I can't remember the year on this when it came out. It's been quite a while, and Carry Guard was honestly not the greatest product when it first came out. But the idea was good. I think the idea was actually outstanding, which is how do we help people in a high risk situation prepare ahead of time in a way that actually does improve their chances of getting through it. And that high risk situation is the legal aftermath. So the way this coverage, and I'm going to put the word coverage up here to try to cover both insurance and prepaid legal, which are both two different ways of trying to address this issue. Um, and what this coverage does is it provides you with the attorney and the money to pay for that attorney. When I say provides the attorney, I mean they find the attorneys ahead of time before you need them. And it provides the money for the attorney. Most of these companies were born after Kerry Guard, and they were born out of competition, which is an outstanding way to improve the product if you have good, strong competition. And when I get to the end of the video, I'm going to talk about the good part of all this controversy that's come out. But why would you need this? People say, like, if I am defending myself, why do I need an attorney? Well, let me ask you another question, and I want to credit, I think it was Andrew Branca. I'd hate to say it was somebody else and be wrong about this, but the question is essentially, how easy should it be to to commit violence against other people in the name of self-defense? So let's take the extreme version. Cops show up at your house, there's a dead person in the front yard, and they're like, hey, what happened? You're like, hey, self-defense. And they're like, smoking the cigar, and they're like, all right, sounds good. And they pack up their shit and they leave. How easy should it be for you to claim self-defense and commit acts of violence against other people? We should have a standard, and that standard is an investigation, and possibly that you're going to have to convince your peers, the jury, that what happened, that unique set of circumstances, was actually justifiable. So, um, all violence is potentially unlawful. If you punch somebody, normally that's an assault charge. If you do it in self defense, you're going to argue why that normally unlawful violence is lawful because of the certain specific situation that led up to that. So let's define justifiable self defense. Okay? What is justified? This is a very, very simple answer. Justified equals no conviction. If your self-defense violence did not end in a conviction, it was legally justified. And if it did end in a conviction, even for a lesser charge, it was not legally justified. I'm not talking about morally, and I'm not talking about the arguments, and I'm not talking about the evidence. I'm talking about the definition of justified violence is, did it end in a conviction or not? So that is a very simple definition, but it's not an easy definition. And there are a lot of ways a case gets to a conviction or to no conviction. The simplest way it ends in no conviction is the cops show up and they ask you if you're all right, and then they go chase down the bad guy, and then nobody ever talks to you ever again. The hard way to get to a justified shooting is to go through a jury trial and get an acquittal, or even worse, get convicted, go to appeals, and then win on appeals. That's the hard way to get a justified act of violence. On the flip side, the easy way to get to a conviction is for you to sign a piece of paper, a plea agreement that says, I'm accepting the charges for this lesser charge in order to avoid some worse charges. So without really any significant legal process, you sign a piece of paper, you sign a conviction, the prosecutor gets to say, hey, we solved that crime, and they get a conviction. Okay. The hard way for the prosecutor is to go through a jury trial and get a conviction, or perhaps multiple trials, because that happens sometimes. I actually had a student in the class about 2 years ago, and she was on a self-defense homicide trial, and she hung the jury because she was not convinced that the prosecution made enough argument to convict the guy. So, and the prosecution said, yeah, we're going to try him again. So that's the hard way to get to a conviction for the prosecution. You cannot even fathom the number of complexities that could go into a self-defense case. So when we're talking about ensuring that or providing some kind of coverage for that, this is an enormously risky venture, business-wise, for these companies. And the ones that use insurance for their products are underwritten by typically high-risk insurance companies. I believe USCCA's company is Universal Fire and Casualty Insurance, and they do high-risk insurance, and it's expensive. And the ones that do prepaid legal They basically do the same thing. They just spread out the risk, but it's risky stuff. If you are insuring violence or covering violence, I mean, if you don't understand how insurance works, and you're not going to get it, but that is an extraordinarily risky thing to try to insure. So these companies are walking very fine lines. When they go to get their products approved in different states, this is where CarryGuard messed up. CarryGuard just started offering this stuff, and they didn't they didn't talk to any of the states, and the states started finding out what CarryGuard was doing, and they started saying, no, 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 you can't do that in our state. And that's part of the reason why CarryGuard started kind of fell apart, is because they ran into insurance commissions across the country, and uh, the different insurance companies who had problems with this basically said, this is murder insurance. You are giving gun owners, you're promising them that they're going to have an attorney when they shoot and kill somebody. So they equate that to murder insurance. And just as a side note, that's incredibly hypocritical on the state's part, because the state retains attorneys for elected officials and agencies and regulatory organizations, et cetera. They retain counsel in case they break the law. And who pays for that? You do. But according to them, having some kind of a legal plan for if you ever had to defend yourself, that equals murder insurance. So anyway, let me step outside. Let me put that aside, I guess, for now. So this coverage is, I'm going to put this in capitals, high risk for these companies. And if you're a single law firm and you want to make a product that people can afford, and yet you want to cover people for legal processes, that's very high risk. It's high risk, high reward, because if you can convince enough people that your product is valuable, you could probably charge a lot for it and get a lot of people to buy it and still do very well. So high risk, high reward. So we talked about CarryGuard having problems. Let me just look at my notes here. So most of these plans have some exclusion for criminal acts. Well, if you've been paying attention, you should have a big question in your head right now. Wait a minute. Didn't you just say that all violence committed in self defense is potentially unlawful? Yeah. So, how do we balance the fact that you are doing something that's potentially unlawful with an exclusion for criminal acts? These exclusions for criminal acts are essentially a way for the companies to protect themselves from people who intentionally go out and commit crimes that don't have anything to do with self defense. So if you put your gun on and you go out to the bar and you get drunk and you find out somebody's talking to your girlfriend, you go back to the parking lot, you say, I'm going to kill this dude. And you walk back into the bar and you shoot that dude. That was an intentional criminal act. How is that different from self-defense? Well, you go to a courtroom and you say, Your Honor, that was self-defense, and we look at the evidence, and you walked up and you executed this guy in the back of the head. You are not allowed to make the self-defense argument in cases like that. Now, it can vary from state to state, and it's highly dependent on the circumstances, but essentially the court must allow you to make a self-defense argument, which is you saying, yeah, I did the thing, but I'm going to argue that it was not criminal. So this criminal exclusion, or these exclusions for criminal acts, are to protect these companies in this high-risk coverage from people who go out and purposely do morally imprudent criminal acts. These exclusions are not intended, nor are they used by these insurance companies to intentionally drop people because they don't want to cover you. That might change in the future. Let me be completely honest. And once these companies grow large enough, it's entirely possible that some of them will start acting in bad faith and not want to cover you. But I will tell you this, and you're going to have to just take my word for this, but I'm not the only one who says it. Go listen carefully to that episode from Gun Owners Radio that was put out yesterday, January 15th. And I apologize, I don't have the title, but I will put the episode in the description, where an attorney describes a case where something unlawful was happening and the guy had to defend himself. And the company that covered him, and I'm not going to put these people on blast right now, but I will just say these companies cover people even when it doesn't perfectly line up with their coverages or their exclusions. I'm not promising that they will. I'm not speaking on their behalf. I'm telling you from experience that I've seen this happen. This is not an excuse for you to go out and say, okay, it's cool, I've got one of these coverages and I'm not going to pay attention and I'm going to get drunk and I'm going to. Don't do that. Okay, not just because it's testing the limits of these companies, but it's a really good way for you to end up with a conviction, no matter who's paying your bills. Don't do that stuff. But I have seen firsthand companies in this space cover things that were definitely outside of the agreement. Okay, not the act, not like going out and murdering people, but I really don't want to go any more detail than that. But I'm just trying to stress the point that these companies are not looking for reasons to drop you from their policies. Uh, Insurance companies, prepaid legal companies, I have not seen that. I have seen, in fact, quite the opposite. Okay, so um, let's talk about marketing. Okay, so the marketing, I hate marketing. Um, it's a necessary evil, but I'm not very good at it. I don't have an instinct for it, and a lot of it makes me feel very uncomfortable. But if you want to grow a business, you've got to figure out how to market your business. And there's two primary ways that these companies market their business in the space of self-defense. One of them is in concealed carry classes. Concealed carry classes where some kind of rep will come in and tell you how great their product is. They'll tell you why you need it, and they'll tell you what they'll do for you and how cheap it is, blah, blah, blah. And then the other way they do it is mostly, I'm going to say mostly YouTube, even though other social media is used. YouTube is the big space for this. And they do it through influencers. So these influencers will say, hey, this video is sponsored by, or, this is why I use this product, or they'll even just do a video about the product itself. And these are big name people. Colion Noir has been a USCCA guy for a long time. That's one of the biggest names, so that's why I put him out there. But there are a bunch of these people who, they shill for these companies. And I say shill with very little judgment. That's what it is. It's just shilling, okay? I like these products, and so I'm not going to get too frustrated with the process of marketing. But there's a problem with this marketing in that the people who are shilling typically don't really know what they're talking about. They're just being paid to talk about this particular product. And because they're influencers, people listen to them. They've got credibility, even though they shouldn't. They just, that's the nature of social media. It's one of the problems I have with it. And there's another problem too. It's not just that the influencers don't know what they're talking about. Almost nobody who carries a gun with a concealed carry permit, or if you're in a state where you don't need one, carries a gun legally but with no permit, almost nobody actually knows how the law works when it comes to self-defense. One of the best resources that I can recommend is Andrew Branca's book, The Law of Self-Defense. I'm going to put that up here. I'm going to run out of room on here, but The Law of Self-Defense. And his book is free on his website, Andrew Branca. He has a pretty good YouTube channel as well. One caveat to recommending this: you should use this to help you understand how the process works and what the risk is, not to try to train around self-defense for this. Leave self-defense training to self-defense people. Leave the law stuff to the lawyers. When Branca gets into trouble sometimes because they'll start trying to tell you how to defend yourself legally, and that is not how we look at violence in self-defense, and it's not good training and it's not good advice. However, he has an enormous amount of experience in the aftermath and dealing with that and representing people and pointing out how complex and risky the self-defense landscape is, legally speaking. So, and Andrew Branca shills for CCW Safe, another excellent company and another excellent way to cover yourself in self-defense, legally speaking. Okay, so we've got people who are selling the product who don't really understand not just the product, but its application. And we have people who are buying the product who don't really understand the product or its application. But the people who are actually applying the product do understand this process. And the lawyers that represent people do understand this process. Now, you're going to have bad apples. You're going to have, your incompetent people are going to slip through. Any organization is going to have incompetent people. And it's entirely possible at some point that somebody who employed one of these companies ends up with an attorney who's not quite up to par. That could happen if you pay the attorney out of your own pocket, and that can happen even as well as these companies do to vet their attorneys. On the note of them vetting their attorneys, this is a point that attorneys on retainer keeps harping on, in that these companies get to pick your attorney. And they're taking advantage of the fact that you don't really understand how this process works when they tell you you don't want them picking your company, you or your attorney. You should pick your attorney. You should vet your attorney. Why should you vet your attorney? You know what the fuck you're doing. All right? If if somebody's paying for your attorney, don't they have a financial interest in this process being as absolutely short as possible? Because literally every hour that goes by is costing the uh, the company that's paying for this is costing them money. So let's make this as short as possible. Going back to Andrew Branca's book, you want to be hard to convict. The way you do that, get a good, competent attorney involved in your case as soon as humanly possible. The sooner you get a good, competent local attorney involved in your case, the less likely you are to be charged, the less likely you are to be dragged through the legal process. So these companies have a very high financial stake in finding the absolute best attorneys that they can for you. So that's a great system. It's mutually beneficial to get the best attorney. It's good for them and it's good for you. Okay. So uh, that's part of the marketing problem. There's another marketing problem that these companies have, which is they don't typically get to share their success stories. Attorney-client privilege dictates that USCCA, CCW Safe, Firearms Legal Protection, Attorneys on Retainer, Armed Citizens Legal Defense Fund, all of these companies, Right to Bear, they can't just decide to start giving customer testimonials. Hey, we represented this person in an aggravated assault case and they got their charges dismissed in 6 days and blah, 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 blah. They can't talk about it. Why? Because the client has to okay that. And a client that does not have an acquittal for their case has a risk if they start talking about the case. If you've ever talked to somebody who's in the middle of a self-defense case, if they're smart, they're going to tell you, I'm not supposed to talk about this. I can't give any details. I'm sorry. And they're doing that because they're protecting themselves, and they're also protecting you by not dragging you into the investigation. They can't talk about it. Or I should say, their attorney is advising them very strongly not to talk about it. If their case goes to a trial, and if they get an acquittal, then in almost all cases, now they can talk about it if they want to, because the risk is essentially gone. They went through the trial. Because we don't have double jeopardy in the United States typically, then they can go out and give the details. But that's such a small fraction of the customer base of these companies. Most of the people who use these companies got arrested on an aggravated assault charge because they've pulled out a gun in a fight, even if they didn't shoot anybody. They got arrested and charged with aggravated assault or felony menacing or unlawful use of a weapon, and they got an attorney involved quickly, and the cases get dismissed. And a dismissed case generally, usually, still leaves the door open that the prosecution could come back in the future and decide to charge you. If more information comes out, if they decide, you know what, we're going to go ahead and do this. So if you go out publicly and talk about it, like you're just risking your future by doing that. So most of the people who end up using these products from these companies, nobody's ever going to know about it. There are thousands of customers who use these products, meaning they get an attorney in a self-defense case a year across all these different companies, and the total size of their customer base, thousands a year use these. And in the current controversy of Kayla Giles, you're hearing about one case, one out of thousands. Let's just take 1,000. You're hearing about 0.1% of 1,000 cases, but there are thousands per year. I would even bet money. I'm not totally certain about this, but I would bet money that USCCA has more than 2,000 cases a year that they represent. That's a lot, and that's just one company. Okay, so the marketing problem that they have, they can't share their success stories. Most of them. If you go on USCCA's YouTube channel, you're going to find a handful. If you go on Firearms Legal Protection's YouTube channel, you're going to find a couple. If you go to AOR, Attorneys on Retainer, you might find a couple. If you listen to CCW Safe's podcast, you're going to hear about a few. That doesn't even scratch the surface of their customer base. Okay. All right. So let's talk about Kayla Giles. Kayla Giles, or Giles, I don't know how to pronounce it. I've heard it both ways. She shot and killed her soon-to-be ex-husband, I believe, in a custody, very messy custody dispute. She shot him in the parking lot, I believe, of a Sonic or a Walmart or something like that. And she was arrested and convicted of second-degree murder. And she had USCCA. And I'm not going to try to go into all the details of this. It's too long. I'm not as well versed. Go to the Gun Owners Radio episode that they put out yesterday. Again, I'll put the link in the description. It's another long video. It's 40 minutes, but it is excellent. It is an excellent analysis of her case. And she got sentenced for second-degree murder. She also got sentenced for 30-year sentence for obstruction of justice for trying to hide a laptop that had some bad evidence on it. Okay. So, and the consecutive, so that judge hates her. He gave her a murder sentence and a 30-year sentence consecutive. So she is never getting out of jail. So Kayla Giles' case kind of made some waves when it first came out, because the news did get out that USCCA did not cover her after they paid the initial attorney fee. They did show up. They put down the 50 grand for the retainer, and after they got their hands into the case, meaning they, a good company, a good insurance company is going to do their due diligence to make sure their money is being spent well, and more details come out, and they say, you know what, Caleb, this is murder. You did this on purpose. You knew this. You planned this. You bought a gun illegally in another state when you had a restraining order against you. So Kayla gets dropped by USCCA. About a year, maybe two. Gosh, I really don't know the time frame for sure on this, but attorneys on retainer, and more specifically, their head attorney, Mark Victor, picks up the case and starts talking about it. At the same time that attorneys on retainer expands their local plan for coverage nationally. They're gonna take their I think I have this right. They had a local product, probably a pilot product, and they then expanded it nationwide. And they're a single law firm, and their marketing edge is to say, we're not an insurance company. We're not really even prepaid legal. We are retained attorneys. You are paying us to keep us on retainer. And as part of the retainer agreement, should these specific types of cases ever come up, we will represent you. And so you're paying them, but you're not paying them what you normally would pay them. You're just paying them a monthly rate. And should you ever need them, they're not going to charge you any extra than that monthly rate. That's essentially how they work. Very experienced litigators. Mark Victor, very experienced litigator, very good litigator. And if you watch enough of his videos, you start to see how good he really is. Unfortunately, because most people don't know what they're watching, they just think they're getting information. But what they're actually getting is highly experienced arguments coming from a highly experienced attorney. And I got to respect that. And I got to say, like, if I ever had to shoot somebody in Arizona, that's who I want. I want Mark Victor, because the way he has characterized this entire drama is outstanding. And it's the kind of thing I'd want from my attorney. I think he's wrong, and I think he's being very unfair to USCCA, but this is America. I can't fault him for what he's doing, all right? So they're not only good litigators, they're also very good business people. They have built a very good business model, and they are marketing that business model really, really effectively. Again, I think they're wrong, and I think they're being unfair, but it's business, and business is business. So I'm not going to hold it against them, but I am going to explain what's going on. Okay. So they're using their talents, their skills, and their experience to litigate Kayla's case publicly to make USCCA look bad. And they're being very unfair to USCCA. And on top of that, USCCA has made a couple mistakes in this whole process, trying to claw back some of their credibility when it comes to this business. USCCA got caught in what is quite literally a no-win situation with Kayla Giles. Listen to the Gun Owners Radio podcast, and you'll see that USCCA basically walked into a nightmare for them as a company. You've got somebody who is not only not only criminal, because Kayla Giles is a criminal. One, because she's been convicted. Two, because she bought a handgun in Texas while she had an active restraining order against her in the state of Louisiana. And she took advantage of the fact that Texas allows you to buy firearms without finishing the background check. I'm not exactly sure how that works. If you have a valid Texas concealed carry permit, which Kayla did. And she violated federal and state laws by buying that handgun. So Kayla was a criminal who defended herself. She's smaller than her former husband. Her former husband was an MMA fighter. So if we're just looking at the biographical information of this case, Kayla looks like a very sympathetic character, but under the covers, there's some serious problems with her case, very serious problems. And I would suspect that USCCA had a sit down with just a few people, Tim Schmidt and probably a couple other people, somebody from U.S. Fire and Casualty Insurance, and they had a powwow, and they said, we got to do something about this case. Now, this is just my opinion, but knowing how this industry works, I know some of the people at USCCA, I know some people at Firearms Legal Protection. I have a better understanding than most people do of how this business works. And they had to sit down and have a conversation and say, what are the consequences if we drop her? And what are the consequences if we keep her? Because remember what I said at the beginning, this is a high risk business model, high risk. And if any of these companies cross a line in any state, it puts the entire industry at risk. Remember, this was characterized at the beginning as murder insurance, and these companies have had to work very hard with insurance commissioners across the country to allow them to do business in these states, promising that this is not murder insurance. And now we have a case where you could at least make the argument that it was being used as murder insurance. So USCCA is just the unlucky company that got caught in this position. It was going to happen at some point. At some point, one company was going to be caught in this exact spot, and it just happened to be USCCA. So USCCA has a decision to make: keep her or drop her. If they keep her, they're putting the entire industry at risk. Not only that, but themselves as a company, putting themselves at risk, getting kicked out of every state that has a problem with them already. If they drop her, they risk getting characterized as the insurance company that dropped their member because they didn't like their case. It's a no-win situation. What are they supposed to do? All right, so they decide to drop her. Kayla goes on to get convicted. Attorneys on retainer sniffs out, picks up the case, just so happens to have a business plan in place to already take advantage of this, and boom, it's off to the races. And Mark Victor and attorneys on retainer start making videos, and that's bad enough. That's bad enough for USCCA. But then they go after the marketing, and they jump on a couple of influencers, and I think Heavy Duty Country was the first one they worked with. And Heavy Duty Country is just a YouTuber, all right? I'm going to tell you from experience, when somebody waves some money in front of your face and tells a compelling story, it's going to be really hard for you to say, hey, I think you might not be totally honest with me. So Heavy Duty Country, at the same time that attorneys on retainer starts ramping up their anti-USCCA rhetoric, not just USCCA. In fact, they start going after all these other companies, calling them insurance, and Mark Victor goes through their contracts and their agreements on his videos and pointing out all the problems with his with those agreements. And to be fair, you're never going to have a perfect contract where like there's no risk at all. I mean, that's not how contracts work. That's not how agreements work. There's always risk involved. But he goes out and to exploit these, and he gets Heavy Duty Country to start talking about how USCCA fucked over Kayla Giles, and it works, and it starts getting traction, and now people are starting to notice. And all the comments under Heavy Duty Country's videos are people going over to attorneys on retainer. So if you, as an uninformed consumer, start paying attention to this, it's going to be, I mean, it's basic human psychology that you're going to start questioning your choice and you're going to start listening to other people and following the crowd. And so attorneys on retainer starts picking up some momentum on this, and then they start picking up more influencers. Um, and it's kind of funny because one of them I was just watching, and I would call him out, but I'm not absolutely certain I have the right name, but he's a big influencer. He talks about a lot of legal stuff. And he puts out a video the other day that says, you know, I was wrong about USCCA and I'm not with them anymore. And now I'm going with attorneys on retainer. And in the video, he mentions that he just picked up some new camera equipment. Like, look, I don't know for sure. I don't know 100% for sure that AOR increase the money that they're paying him over what USCCA is, but I know from experience that once you, as a business owner, you come into a little cash and you start doing the things you've been waiting to do, but you didn't have the money to do. And I'm going to put that video in the comments. So it's not that I'm trying not to call this guy out. I will call him out. I just cannot be certain I've got the right YouTube channel name in my head right now. So I'll put that, I'll find that video and I'll put it in the comments, and you're going to see him talk about his new camera setup. And in the exact same video where he says he went to attorneys on retainer. Attorneys on retainer is aggressively marketing, and that includes paying these influencers more money than USCCA was. It's just how it works. It's just how it works. All right. But the sad thing about it is that they're getting these influencers to say things that are either mischaracterizing the truth or just aren't true at all. And again, it's business and I don't fault them, but I want people to know that, because as a consumer, the more you know, the better you can do for yourself. So USCCA gets stuck with this loser case. They get stuck with the bad press. Attorneys on retainer exploits the situation, leaning heavily on the main avenue that's available to them, because attorneys on retainer right now cannot do the CCW class thing. They don't have the manpower to get into concealed carry classes across the country, so they're relying almost exclusively on the YouTube marketing front, making their own videos and then getting the influencers involved. So in influencers, they're underinformed and they're whores. And again, I say that somewhat respectfully, but you got to understand influencers only get to the place where they are when they're willing to whore out themselves to the people who are willing to pay them. So, and it's working. And it's working because people do not have the time or the attention to get deep into this stuff. They don't even know how self-defense cases work. And if you don't really know how self-defense cases work, then you don't really know how these companies operate. So I recommend that you have one of these companies. If you like attorneys on retainer, keep them, use them. If you like USCCA, keep them, use them. If you're looking for another company, do your research and find them. CCW Safe has been around a long time. They have some excellent people running that company. Firearms Legal Protection, I know from experience from students of ours who have used them. Excellent company and very affordable. Armed Citizens Legal Defense Fund is basically a co-op, and it's got some really great people in that organization who have been around in this business for a very, very long time in the Second Amendment community. U.S. Law Shield, excellent company. Not really as well known anymore. They haven't done a great job with marketing, but they do what they say they do, and they're a reliable company. If you're going to defend yourself with or without a firearm, I recommend that you have a legal plan, and these companies do what they say they do, and they do it in a way that allows most people to have that coverage. In the United States, you get the justice that you can afford. And unfortunately, that's true, but you could complain about it, but I think it's better to have a plan instead of just complaining. So, what's good about this? What's the good outcome of this? Highly competitive industries tend to produce better products. So, for all this controversy going on, USCCA is going to have to work very hard to convince people that they are, in fact, a good quality product. And I think they already are, but this is going to force them. And in fact, USCCA about 6 months ago, I think it was about 6 months ago, increased some of the benefits of their program. I don't even think they raised their rates. I could be wrong about that, but they just added some stuff that was missing from their program. Iron sharpens iron, and I think that that's possibly a good outcome from this. What's bad about this is just a shitload of misinformation, and unfortunately, this is very high stakes. This is a very high stakes arena where you have people whose lives are on the line, whose freedom is on the line, whose finances are on the line, and misinformation in this space is a terrible, terrible thing. So please, if you care about that, I strongly encourage you to share this video, not because I want the clicks and the likes. I really just want the information out there. I always tell people, if you go back and watch my other videos, you'll see me say, and I'm going to say it right now, I don't give a fuck about your likes. I don't give a fuck about your subscriptions. I do give a fuck about comments. I want comments. I want to talk this out. I want to argue the points. I want to hear what you liked or hated about the video. Conversation is how we move the ball forward. But for this video, I do strongly encourage you to share this with people who have had questions about how this business works, who have questions about what USCCA is doing, who have questions about attorneys on retainer. And please, please share this information and go check out the Gun Owners Radio episode that I'm putting in the description. It is a phenomenal review of Kayla Giles' case. One last thing, I should have mentioned this earlier. Alan Cawley is another person that USCCA did not represent who was a customer of theirs. There is less information out there about his case than there is about Kayla Giles, and it's also a different type of case. And according to USCCA, and I believe according to Alan Cawley, Alan decided not to use USCCA's attorney and for some reason went with a public defender. We're never going to get the full story on that. I don't know how to explain that. And USCCA did come out and publicly say, we offered to pay and he chose not to. And if they were lying about that, they're opening themselves up to litigation. So I don't know as much about that story. It is something to explore. It is something to question. But think about that in the context of everything else that I've said so far in this video. And I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you very much. I hope this was helpful. And check us out at gunsforeveryone.com, and I will talk to you guys later.